Hello everyone, welcome to our channel. This is the first video, so hit subscribe and hit the bell button to get notified about more video content on Azure APIs. This is the first part in the series of videos. Today we are going to use Postman to make some API calls, how these calls can be authenticated against Azure Active Directory. That's what we are going to see in this video. Going forward, we will use different types of APIs like the billing API, cost management API, etc., and how we can retrieve information about our billing and other details using the REST API. So stay tuned for more content. So in order to do this, we need a couple of tools. Mainly, we'll be using Postman to run the APIs and check if we are getting the desired outputs. Then we need a service principal with at least contributor access even the reader access is fine. Let's create the service principal. That service principal will be used for authentication against Azure Active Directory, and the token will be used to can be used to call any API that we want, any management API that we want. So let's get started. The first thing that we need is we have to open Cloud Shell. So there are multiple ways by which you can create a service principal. You can use Azure portal. You can use Azure CLI. You can use PowerShell to create. Out of all this, I feel Azure CLI is the easiest way to create a service principal. So let me just open Cloud Shell and let me mount the storage first. So in order to the Cloud Shell to work, we need to have a storage mounted for that. So as this is a new subscription and my previous subscription is disabled, I have to mount the storage again to get this working. So we'll wait for a couple of seconds for the storage to get created and connect to the bash shell. So the storage account has been created. It's requesting for a Cloud Shell right now. It takes a couple of seconds to connect to the Cloud Shell for the first time. So for some reason I had to restart my Cloud Shell to get it connected. Let's see if I'm able to connect to my Cloud Shell. So the command that we are going to run is adsp. So Azure AD is an Active Directory, SP is service principal. So in order to run this command, you need to have at least a global administrator privilege, or an application developer will also suffice. But I prefer to have the global administrator privilege before running this particular command. So we'll run this command. Create for RBAC is something that I use for testing purposes. In real world scenarios, I would recommend you to go with a specific role. Create for RBAC actually adds that particular role to the subscription as a contributor. So that service principal will be added as a contributor to the current subscriptions. Before we run this, I just want to make sure that my shell is pointing to the correct subscription. I'll go with az count show. So this is currently going to the Azure Pass sponsorship subscription. So that's completely fine. So what I'll do is ACADSP create for RBAC. And I just have to pass a name to the service principal. I'll say that your API, something like that. So you can see that it's trying to create that particular service principal and added the contributor role to the subscription, which is 511. So that's the same subscription which is we have here. So we have a set of information which is written here: the app ID, the display name, password, and the tenant ID. So we need to keep this information handy because this is something that we need. So I'll just open a notepad and I'll just paste this information so that I can use it. So I'll go to Postman In Postman, you can directly use these values, but if you have multiple subscriptions or you have a multi-tenant model, what I would recommend is to have something called environments in Postman. So what you can do is you can come here, create an environment, and the environment name I'll just give it Azure sponsorship, or this is for my dedicated subscription where I currently have the permission. I can reuse this service principal because it's an Azure Active Directory object. I can reuse it with other subscription as well, and I can add that service principal to other subscriptions as well. That is also possible. You don't have to create individual service principals for each subscription. If the subscriptions are within the same tenant, you can reuse the identity. All you have to do is just add or just give the necessary permissions to the service principal at the subscription scope. We will add a new variable here. We will name it as a client ID, and the value that we are going to give will be the client ID is at ID. I'll take this value, paste it here and here. Next one is a client secret, which is the password that we are going to copy from here. Copy the password, go back, paste it here. The next thing that we need is a tenant ID. So we'll copy the tenant ID from here. We'll also copy the subscription ID because in future there will be several API calls that you might be calling, which will be scoped at the subscription level. So it's better that you have the subscription ID also added here so that you can reuse this variable in your Postman API calls. So let me go back to Azure portal and copy the subscription ID, which is here. The subscription ID here, and I can click on add. So the past sponsorship subscription environment has been created. Now what we need is we need to create the first call. The first call would be we need to call the Azure Active Directory or the login endpoint to get the bearer token, which is required in the authentication header of other API calls that we are making. So in order to get that done, we will first, it's more like working with the browser. So you click on a new tab, you get a place to enter the URL. So the URL that we need here, before we get to the URL, I just want to go back to the environment and go back to this one, edit. I just want to add one more thing, which is called the resource. So the resource is going to be, we are mainly going to work with the management API. If you're working with Vault, the scope is going to be a different thing. Here we will specify as a resource. This is only applicable if you are going to work with the Azure Management API, like the billing API, cost management, VM, resource groups, etc. So I'll just update this because I'm going to mainly use the token to work with Azure Management API. So the request is going to be a post request where we are going to post the client ID, the secret, all the information that we have in our environment to the login endpoint. So it is going to be https://login.microsoftonline.com slash. Now we need the tenant ID. So if we type like this, we will be able to see the tenant ID here, the variable that we declared in our environment, auth2 slash token. So since this is a post request, in the body of this call, we have to specify certain details. So I'll go to the body, I'll put it to x www form URL encoded. The first key I'm going to use is grant underscore type. So what kind of it could be a client certificate, client credentials, etc. Here we are using the client credentials. So I'll just specify client underscore credentials. Now we need the client ID, so I'll write under client underscore ID. This is stored in our client ID variable. Now I need the client underscore secret, which is going. The key values should be the same thing. You cannot change that. This is something uh, the API is expecting. You can have a different name for your variable if you like, but the key values should be like this. Client secret, there it is. Now the resource is number one, which is stored in our resource variable. So the advantage is this: if I want, I can copy this environment and have multiple copies and update the values accordingly. And I can switch environment easily from here. That's the biggest advantage. Now that we have the value stored in our body, the next thing that we have to use is we have to go to. We can directly hit send. There's nothing much we need. So you can see that I got the bearer token back. So this will be the bearer token I'll be using to make the management API calls. Here, I would like to implement one more additional tip here, because in the test you can write a script like this. So what it does is it actually extracts the access token from this particular response, and stores it inside a variable called bearer token. So if I go to a particular new tab, and if I just type BEA, and you can see that the value is already copied to this particular variable, which is a global variable. That means I can use it in any environment that I have. Probably I have multiple subscriptions with the same, which are using the same service principle. So I can have this bearer token as a global variable because the token issuer is the same tenant. So I can reuse it in multiple environments for multiple subscriptions which are part of the same tenant. So this is how you will be able to um, you'll be able to. I'll keep the script in the description, which will help you to you know set up your Postman environment. For easy purpose, what I would recommend is you can save this environment so that you can call this later also. AD token, you can put a name there, and you can create a collection. Collection is more like a folder for organizing your API calls. AD token, I'll just give that name. Save. So this will come in your collections. AD token, you will see this particular request. This request is only valid for 3600 seconds. For example, if I want to get the list of all resource groups, what I can do is I can run the get resource group. So let's just open Google and just go to get resource rest. Here you go inside this. I want to get the list of resource groups for a subscription, and this is what the URL is. So what I'll do is I'll just copy this from here. I'll come back to Postman. I'll just paste it here. So instead of subscription, I just put two curly brackets. That's how the variables are notated in Postman. So the moment I put two parentheses, it automatically resolves to the environmental variable that we have. So using this, it will be easy for you to copy the API calls from Azure documentation and you use it in your Postman environment. In the headers, we will add the authorization header, and the value is going to be bearer. Then we will use the token that we generated earlier. Let's see if we are able to get the output. So you can see that I got the list of resource groups. One is the Cloud Shell storage Central India, and the other one is AWS to Azure, which is a migration created in East Asia, and this one is in Central Asia. This looks pretty much same to the output of get AZ group list or get Azure AZ resource group in PowerShell. Alright, I hope this helps you to get started with Azure APIs. Thank you.